Welcome everyone. Another episode of Piping Talks, and this time it's not piping; it's drumming. We have our second drummer on after a few episodes. Funny enough, because I'm a drummer, so you would expect that I would talk to more drummers than pipers. But happened that today is a drummer, and we have Jake Jørgensen all the way from Scotland. Jake is actually not from Scotland. You can see with the family name. So we're going to hear all about where he's from, how he picked up drumming from a country that isn't necessarily known for Scottish drumming, which I'm very curious about and super interested to hear more. And then Jake played for many great bands in Grade 1, especially Shots for a number of years, and now is the leading drummer of Scottish Power. So very curious again about how he transitioned from playing with one of the best band in the world to transitioning to being a leading drummer into one of the other best band in the world. So very curious about that, and just talk drumming with Jake. So Jake, how are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks
You
for having
good?
me on. Having me on.
Yeah, of course,
Yeah,
of
all
course.
good.
So
Yeah,
you're based in Scotland right now, right? Are you in Edinburgh?
yeah. I'm just outside Edinburgh now, in a place, a small village called Kirknewton,
Nice.
about 11 miles out from Edinburgh. And I've been out here for about 7 years or so.
Oh,
But I
wow.
spent most of my time in Scotland over the last, well, since 2001,
Right.
in Edinburgh. But I've moved out. Yeah.
In Edinburgh, right. So I want to, it's funny because we've known of each other for many years, and I've always, you don't have a lot of foreigners that play now more, but when I was, playing at Bogle in Great One, it was not that many foreigners, so it was actually nice to, hear rather different accent or just someone that was not from Scotland. I felt like, it was. I don't know. I felt like I always had a different
Connection.
connection. Yeah, or if it was interesting. And so you're originally from Denmark, is that right?
That's right. Yeah, I grew up in just outside Copenhagen in a small place called Herlev. So yeah, again, well, it's not as small as Kirknewton over here, but yeah, a small place.
Nice. And then, like, is there a big connection, or was it a big connection to Scotland, like back when you were like starting to play the drum?
For me personally, not really. It all really happened by coincidence. So my brother and I we went to this after school club where we got involved in playing music with. We started a band, and the two of us took turns with the bass guitar and the drum kit. My brother played the drum kit the most, but we would swap around now and again, and just there was no one there really to teach us properly. But there was a few folk that knew a little bit about playing instruments, and they passed it on. We kind of just picked it up from there ourselves, and tried to learn it on our own. We did end up doing some gigs and things like that, but we were
Oh,
very young.
nice.
We were only like 9, 10, 11 years old.
That's awesome.
So it was a parent of one of the other children in this after school club who was a piper, and with the Copenhagen Caledonia pipe band, and so they were looking for drummers, and he asked us both if we were interested in coming along and trying it out, and so we did, and yeah, the rest is history, I
Did,
suppose.
did you
We,
know?
we we
Did you
loved
know
it.
pipe band drumming? Did you at all back then?
I'd never, no, never been exposed to it before. Knew nothing about it, but um, there was a guy called Per Nørklid, a very Danish name. He was the first to start me off and put the drumsticks in my hands, and I think really he was the driving kind of motivator behind me getting going at the beginning. He was a great teacher, really. And
Wow.
he actually became quite involved personally in our lives. He would come to our house and give us lessons and stay for dinner and go out and play football with us, and having those other things kind of mixed in alongside the drumming, I think helped us to bite into it a bit more, and buy into it. Sorry, and just, yeah, he was good at drawing us in, and holding us there and holding our attention, and that
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Was He used to buy us cases of soda. You wouldn't do that these days, but that he would bribe us basically to sit and do single strokes for 3 minutes, without stopping, that kind of.
That's a great technique. You should use that with, probably
Well,
not right now, but it's a good technique.
I think in the very early stages, that kind of thing is not necessarily that specific example, but a little bit of bribing and a bit of kind of luring people in, and with young kids, I think that's important, to try and catch them, because just sitting playing mummy daddies and paradiddles is, for most people, not the most interesting thing in the world.
Yeah.
So there's got to be something else, and he was good at creating that something else for us.
That's awesome. I had no idea. And so he was so giving you listen, and you were kind of like playing with the band. When was the moment where you were like, "Wow, I'm really enjoying this. This is awesome." I had never heard of pipe band drumming or pipe bands before. And when is the moment where it clicked, and you were like, I wanna really pursue this"? Maybe staying in Denmark or before you moved to Scotland.
I mean, obviously things evolved, and I got better. And I mean, I remember my first few solo competitions I didn't complete because I was so nervous. I was unprepared. I had no idea how to prepare for something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, moving on to your question, when did it really click? I think initially when the same guy, my drumming teacher, he would do cassette recordings and collections of 78 Frasers and old really good pipe band recordings, and even recordings taken. They sounded like they were out of a pub where there was people. It sounded like an Irish kind of pub where there was some kind of jam session going on, but it was all just this kind of introducing me to the style and the culture in a way as well, and I think that kind of got me hooked a wee bit. I remember sitting on my bike on my way to band practices with my drum on the handlebar.
Don't try this anymore. Don't try this. Don't try this at home.
No, I know. In the pitch black, driving, it was crazy. But I would listen to it all the way. These recordings, and that, I think that really kind of got me. I really enjoyed the music. It was when I started going to the Scandinavian Summer School, which was an annual school, a week-long residential school in Denmark. It was when I started going to that I think something clicked in me, because I started meeting these pipe band drumming greats, that would come over. Eric Ward was there. Reid Maxwell wasn't at that particular school, but I met him at other workshops in Denmark. Barry Wilson, he was probably the person who really inspired me to want to join Shots.
Right.
So I would use these annual events and feed off the things I was taught by these great drummers, and I would just immerse myself in their style and in their way of playing and their scores for the next year until the next person came around. Then I'll try something else.
So it was like a different person.
But yeah, I guess, but yeah. I guess the last couple of years before I left, it was all about the shot style for me, because that really got me hooked. I really loved it. Just watching Barry's hands when he was playing, I was mesmerized, and then I started listening before he actually came over. When it was announced that Barry was going to be teaching at the summer school, about 6 months before maybe, I bought the Band Room Master Solo Drumming CD.
Right.
And I found him on there, and I found Jim on there, and I knew they played in the same band. And I wanted to learn the scores. I didn't have the music, but I wanted to try and prepare for him coming over so I could, be a little bit on the front foot. So that's when I learned to write music, actually. So I think a few folk have tried to teach me to write music in the past, but it's never really worked. It was only when I actually sat down myself and properly worked it out, So I would do it by listening to their MSRs and the hornpipe and jigs on this CD, and I could recognize the movements they were playing, and I thought I had a good idea of what they were playing. If they were playing a flam 5 or drag 5 or run a singles or whatever, I had no idea how to write it. So I would dig out my folder with all my scores from Reid Maxwell and Tom Brown and all these guys, and I'd find a 2/4 march. If it was a march I was trying to write down, and I'd find the movement in that score, copy it over, and that way, eventually, after I'd done 2 or 3 scores, it started to click out. It started to make sense why it was written like that, and yeah, I think that's how I learned to write music.
Oh wow! So you did
Um,
both, right? You were hooked. Definitely at that point you're hooked. Like if you're listening to the recording, you're trying to match the style and everything, but you're also looking at like, wait, what's that rudiment, and then kind of go through scores. You kind of both learned how to write music and also like developed, listening and playing over and over. And you mentioned Barry. Did you know Barry Wilson at the time? Like, did you know the names that were on the CD and stuff like that, or you just like by just listening, you were like, wow, I'm drawn to the shot style?
no, thinking about it now, I don't know what came first, the Bandroom CD or Barry Wilson. I can't remember now, but I mean, no, I wouldn't have known Barry until he came over and taught at the school. I wouldn't have known any of these guys really. I don't
Right.
think Jim Kilpatrick was a new name to me. It was only after I became familiar with um, with Barry that I knew about Jim. I think,
Right.
so I knew about shots, but I wasn't really familiar with the name Jim Kilpatrick. I guess the internet wasn't a huge thing back then, and
We're not talking about years. We're not talking about age. It was not popular, let's say. But it's funny. You were
yeah.
probably like, "Oh, is that how you look like?" I've been listening to you play for hours, and this is how you look like. And so you mentioned Jim. What like? And so obviously you're super hooked. You love the style, and you were like, "Why don't I just try out? And why don't I just move to Scotland?" Is that kind of how it happened, or what was the? How did you make? I know for you know, take an example. It's not about me, but obviously my dad was very much into bog hole and had lessons with Tom and Gordon, similar to what you did in summer schools and stuff like that. And I'd never met Gordon or Tom, and I remember going to the war solos one time, and it was like so nerves wracking to say, I can I I love the band, like can I come for a few practices and I'd love to play one day, but not even picturing playing. It was just like, wow. How was it for you? Did you go to Scotland and then try to have a meeting with Jim or Barry, or how did the connection happen, and how did you make it work?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, Barry was over at this summer school 2 years in a row, and at the end of the first school, I was already hooked. Then I was like, oh my goodness, this is great. I was totally wowed. So I spoke to Barry at the end of the school. I was only 18, 19 at this point, but I said to him, do you think I would be good enough to join your band, because I'd really like to play this music. Um, and his response was, if it was up to me, then yeah, I would give you a shot, kind of thing. But it's not. That's Jim's decision. But he said, I'll put in a good word for you if you want me to. So the next year went, and I was still in school, and I was still kind of studying and stuff. So it wasn't an immediate thing. I wasn't going to be able to do it within the next year anyway.
Hmm.
So, but then Barry came back for the next school, and I asked him again at the end of that school, I still want to do this. And would you mind putting a word in and setting up a phone call or something? And so he did. So he spoke to Jim, and we arranged to speak on the phone. And yeah, I remember that being very nerve wracking, actually. I was super nervous, because over these 2 years, I had learned a lot about Jim and his successes, and the
Right.
success of the Shots course through the 90s. And suddenly the whole thing became a lot bigger than just really liking the music. It was the most successful drum corps ever, kind of, and or to my mind at that point anyway. Well, I guess they'd just come off a winning streak of 11 worlds in a row or something like that, hadn't they?
So they were the big,
Um,
yeah. Definitely.
yeah, so yeah, it was a big deal, and I was really nervous. Jim was really nice on the phone. I remember I couldn't really understand him, the Scottish accent. I like to think my English was okay, but I wasn't familiar with the accent so much. So there was a wee bit of repeating things, and Jim couldn't really pronounce my name, Jakob, in Danish. So
That's right.
after a few times of trying, he said, Could I just call you Jake?
Love it.
So that is why people now call me Jake over here. That's the story behind that.
Well, I didn't even ask, like,
He
are you okay? Are you okay with people calling you Jake? Or I should have probably introduced with Jacob, but Jacob. But
no. Listen, I don't mind what people call me. I've been called many things. So yeah, so we spoke and you know it was all pleasant and we agreed that he would fax me the scores. Fax. This seems like such an old school thing. So
okay,
he
no,
faxed.
yeah,
So he faxed all the MSRs and the medleys to my mum's work fax, and I remember going over there in the middle of the night because I couldn't wait till the next day, and going into it was in the basement. But went to the basement and picked up all these copies, and I was like, it was like Christmas, you know.
yeah.
And I went home and just started playing, and yeah, loved it. So it was in November 2000 that I eventually then moved over. I had also at the Scandinavian Summer School met a tenor drummer from the Vale of Atholl who was over teaching. Lindsay Kay was her name, and she helped me with a contact in Edinburgh, a lady who was renting out a room, and so I spoke to her and we set that up, and it was great for me because I'd never lived away from home, so food was included, and it was just a basic cheap rent and food. She would cook my meals and stuff like that as well, which was
That's
ideal. I had
amazing.
saved up enough money not to work as well, so really, I had no worries. I came over, and for the first at least 6 months or longer, I think. I really could just focus on drumming, and I did. I drummed all day long for most of that year. I'd get up in the morning, I'd drum before breakfast, have breakfast, drum more, have a cup of tea, drum more. It was just all drumming.
Wow,
So
that's
I think
crazy.
I
Like
needed to
you were
do that.
so hooked.
Yeah, but I needed to do that because I'm jumping ahead a little bit here. But coming from a 3B band, which I was, to the drum corps that's the most successful of all time. That was a huge jump for me. I could play the scores, and I could, I think I could play them reasonably well. But fitting in with all these guys that played together for 15 years, and the difficult chips that we used to play in shots, that was a real challenge, because that was completely new to me.
Yeah,
Um,
and
so it was a major challenge.
it's not easy to a fit with any core, but especially when you haven't been there and you just start, and you have weeks and months to get used to the style, but especially a core where everyone at that time, I don't know every names, but everyone at that time had been playing for years, like you mentioned. So it was like it was like one person playing the exact same
Mhm.
style. Now you do have like people that move bands, and so you may have like a mix of style, and then you create something out of it. But back then it was like, I remember Vogel was the same, where everyone had been playing for 10 years, and so you enter, and if you're a little out in terms of style, then you hear it. And so for you, it must have been like trying to fit in as quick as possible. Was it intimidating, like your first practice, you enter the band hall, and you see all these guys?
It was. It was. I mean, my first meeting with Jim, he actually drove out to meet me in Edinburgh, which I thought was. I don't think many leading drummers would do that. I don't think I've ever driven to a different city to meet a new player. I'll just ask them to come up to the band. But I thought that was very good of him. Maybe I should take a leaf out of his book. um, so he came to meet me, and we went for a coffee and just kind of chatted, and he kind of helped relax me a wee bit there because obviously I was very young and in a foreign country, didn't know a soul, and this it was a big move for me. So he was good that way. But in terms of when I started coming up to the band, yeah, that was a lot of pressure. I remember many nights during that first year sitting on the train home and thinking, "That's it, I'm going home. That's it, I'm finished."
Oh, really?
Um, oh yeah, yeah. Jim was very good at picking me back up again if I was in that mode. But I mean, he was a hard taskmaster. I think he would probably he would agree that he was. But I mean, I had so much respect for him, and I know he would always say to me, "I'm hard on you because I want you to make it. I want you to play." And I think that was
It,
true.
yeah,
But still,
it's funny thinking back because and I didn't do that in the intro, but you know, for those that don't know you, I hope that people that listen to this podcast are into pipe band drumming or pipe band in general, and they've heard your name at least once. But you've played with shots for many years, won every sort of majors or competition possible, and you're also one of the best drummer in the world. So looking back at when you're like on the train home and saying, that's it. I'm quitting. I'm going home. And then, I don't know, 10, 20 years later, you're one of the best in the world and you're, great at what you do. So it's kind of, would you have ever imagined that you would make it your career and this is what you were going to do for a living?
no, my plan was always to come over here for a year and then go back home and study. Um,
Right.
but yeah, as much as I say it was a tough year, on those nights where I would go to bed thinking that I'm going to start arranging things for going home. I would wake up the next morning and I'd be like, right, I'm going to show him. And I'd go back down and I'd practice all day again, and then I'd feel a lot better. So I guess I was incredibly determined. I had a lot invested in coming over, and I'm not the kind of guy that likes to give up on things as much as I was feeling like that in the moment. I was very determined to make it work. And I was learning so much, but I think that it was just such a steep learning curve that it was just tough. It was a really really tough thing.
And also,
I felt really, yeah.
you were
On you
also in
go.
a new country, right? So, that's one thing where you're not familiar with the language, the accent. Sorry for those in Scotland listening, but it is quite difficult if you have not heard, anyone from Scotland, like you mentioned before. New country, and I have a funny. It's not really funny, but I remember, I don't know where we were. It must have been the station bar or something like that. You were telling a story. I thought it was hilarious, but I could really relate with it. Is I think you were driving. You just had a car, and you were in Edinburgh, and just like the fact that you're driving on the other side in the car and on the side on the road, and like you're telling like a funny story about what happened when you first moved and you had to adapt to a new country and a new way of living, plus the drumming. So you had a lot going on within a year. What was the most challenging? Was it being and moving to Scotland and having to adjust to speaking English and you know um, getting your coffee at Greg's and doing sort of like stuff in Scotland, or was it the drumming part?
I didn't think too much about all the kind of logistical things. To be honest, I just kind of it was the means to an end. It was a way of getting to where, or it was what was going to allow me to do what I love doing, and that was the drumming. It was all about the drumming, and um, that was the main challenge as well. It was yeah, it was hard. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And I still do. But yeah, that first year was that was the main challenge, was just holding it together. And trying to learn to do what these guys were doing. But it was a great learning ground, a great training ground, because I was surrounded by, like I said, all these people had played together for so many years. And we're talking people like Barry Wilson, Jim himself, and Willie Kerr, who was a great inspiration to me and a great support as well. He was really good. But other players like David Proudfoot and Simon Litt, all these guys that took part in that 11 in a
Hmm.
row World Championships. They were just, yeah, they were
Great
just they
bunch
were
of
just
guys.
great. And yeah,
Yeah.
a great bunch of guys. And once you're after that first year, once I after the first competition, actually, as soon as I'd played once, it was like you're part of the family. Um, and it was like a family.
Yeah,
Everybody
you
looked
felt like it
after
was
each other.
different.
And Yeah, it was. And maybe most of that was maybe in my head, because I didn't feel part of it until I had actually proven that I could do it.
Yeah.
Um, so it's not that I felt unwelcome up until I played, but I felt more part of it, I suppose,
Like a
because I
confident
knew.
boost, I imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
that's awesome. It's great to hear, and it's also, I was super excited to chat with you because it's super inspiring when you hear someone that is not from a Commonwealth country, not necessarily grew up in pipe band, and got hooked and then decided to take the risk in moving into or moving to Scotland and joining a top band, and especially the big gap that you had between grade 3A you were mentioning to grade 1. It's a lot of effort and determination, like you described. So that's it's great to hear. I hope it inspire people that are maybe living into another country and really hooked into pipe and drumming and want to go forward with it and move to Scotland and try to learn from the best. So um, and then moving back to you spent many years with shots. How many years did you do? Like 10 probably.
I think it's well, so was it 2000 till 2014? But then I had a couple of years in 10, 11 where I broke off and became leading drummer of LMB, Lothian and Borders Police.
And then you
So
came
there's that,
back
yeah.
for a year. Yeah.
And then I came back to shots when the band folded. Unfortunately, things didn't work out there with the police. There was
Hmm.
and was the pipe major. Neil Hall was pipe major at the time, and he ended up leaving right very late in the winter, and there wasn't enough time to get someone else in. And the police, I think the police force was already minded to they were kind of, I think, swithering whether to keep the band going or not. And that
And that
was,
didn't
I
help.
think, the excuse they needed
Yeah.
to pull the plug.
And then you came
Um,
back to shots for a few years. And
Couple
when
of
was
years.
the moment? When was the moment where you were like, I think I'm ready? Again, it's so funny listening to you like 5, 10 minutes ago saying like, you were hooked, but also your confidence was going up and down in the first year. And then, you spent, more than 10 years with the band afterwards. Great team member, by the way. Not many people stay over 10 years with same band, so it's good to hear. And when was the moment where you're like, I think I'm ready to go on my own and actually, join and be a leading drummer of a band, maybe LNB or Scottish Power now.
Yeah, I don't know if there was one particular moment, but over the years, obviously, after so many years of playing in the same band in the same style, as much as I liked it and I loved the playing, I felt I maybe needed a new challenge. And more and more people were beginning to say to me, when are you going to take your own core and that kind of, and obviously that gets you thinking, should I be taking my own core? Um, and that's kind of how the kind of thought started, I suppose. And then, but also I think from the moment I started teaching, I was already then beginning to write drum scores. I'd been doing a bit of that even in my youth in Denmark. But I was doing it much more regularly as a teacher, and I
Mhm.
think I became quite a lot better at it through teaching. Um, and so, yeah, but I mean, by the time the L&B job came up in 2010, I think it was something like that. Um, I think I had been for a good 3, 4 years. I'd been thinking that maybe I should be doing this. Maybe I should. I'd like to try
Right.
my own ideas out a wee bit here. You start. You're playing the music and it's enjoyable music, but you start to think, I would have maybe done something a wee bit different here. I would have done that, and I was starting to get more and more of these kind of thoughts of
I'm sure Jim will
just
appreciate
wanting.
to hear that.
Yeah, I'm sure he would. And I had a long conversation with Jim about the whole thing. I felt, yeah, it was very conflicting for me to make that move because it was my home. I considered Shots my home, and it had been for the whole time I lived in Scotland. That was my musical home, and it's where I belonged, kind of thing. And all my friends were there. It was a hard thing to do actually. But I
I
also
imagine.
felt I needed the challenge. I think I needed something to keep me going because I was going a bit stale, maybe. Not because of anyone else, just because I needed to evolve a bit, I think. Um, so that, yeah, I moved to LMB and did that for a few years. That was probably my most challenging time in pipe bands.
Really?
of all the many years. Yeah, uh, it was very, very rewarding, to do my own thing, and and write all my own scores, and I love the whole process of all that, But in terms of first of all, people management, just that was my first exposure to that, really, and that was just a minefield. I found in my first few years, a complete minefield. So, but I think I learned a huge amount in those 2 years. I actually really enjoyed working with Ian Duncan. He was a he was very supportive and really calming influence on a band, I think, in general. Um,
I
and
say,
and I think he appreciated me as well.
yeah, I imagine the collaboration was. I mean, he's very talented piper, but also medley sort of like writer and putting medleys together. So it must have been exciting for a drumming point of view. It's funny. I talked to a few guests that are. Alex Gandy, for example, who took the pipe major role that he's in right now at quite a young age, and exactly same as you. First thing he said is, I can play any tunes. I can teach anyone, but the people management and getting people on board and sort of bringing this team spirit together to kind of like push the band forward was actually the hardest part. And I feel like one of the reason where that I'm doing this conversation is because sometimes it's not highlighted as much as the actual playing of things. Sure, you hear the band, you're like, wow, they're sounding great, but there's so much of the sort of invisible work that's been done before on making sure people come to practices, just even that, or making sure that you have a solid core of players that can come in and manage that. Do you think you were better the second time around when you took Scottish Power after having gone through such a tough, few years with NNB when you took the job and didn't work out? You felt like you were prepared better?
Absolutely, yeah. Um, Definitely prepared me for the next thing. I mean, I suppose I don't know if I really had a long term plan when I joined LMB, other than I just needed to do this and
Right.
go and get my feet wet, and just have a go at it and see if I liked it, see if I enjoyed it, and see if I could make something out of what was really a struggling grade one band, and I wanted to test myself in a way. But yeah, it definitely prepared me for the next step. But I would also say, when I joined the Scottish Power, it was actually easier because the band was generally in a better place, um, than L&B was when I went there. So it's a lot easier to attract good players when you already have good players and the band is already in the mix, or at least in the top half of the grade. It's a lot easier to attract good players in that situation. Whereas if the band is already at the bottom of the prize list, or outside the prize list, um, it's very
Harder.
difficult to
Yeah.
attract better bands that are sorry players that are able to play in better bands, I suppose.
Do you feel
So
do you feel like you work together? That's super interesting. And again, those are things that people might not think about, but it's true. You need top players to attract more top players. It's as stupid as it sounds. It's exactly the way it works. And having moving to Scottish Power, which was already a well established band, with Chris Armstrong in the pipe major, and the band doing well even before you joined, it definitely helped you get the players that you wanted.
yeah, I mean, also working with Chris Armstrong is has been a really great experience. He's super organized, like probably the most organized guy I've met ever, in any walk of life. Yeah, he's just, yeah. He's very black and white. Chris is. I remember the first time meeting him, thinking, "Oh, he's a bit intense." But, I'm sure people say that about me sometimes. So maybe we're a good match that way. But I appreciate Chris for being very, very straight up and down, and very, very black and white. And he calls it how he sees it. He doesn't mince his words. Sometimes you might not like what he says, but at least you know where you stand, kind of thing. And
Right.
I appreciate that.
It's
But yeah,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
in terms of organizing a band, he's very efficient, very efficient.
Nice. It's funny you
Your
say
turn.
he's the most organized person. I've been fortunate to have seen some of your music, and I remember when you shared a Dropbox folder, and not that I've been with many leading drummer or anything like that, but it was so well. I'm a designer on the side, so I'm not OCD, but I like things to be quite clean and organized and stuff like that. And I remember seeing the Dropbox folder, and I was like, oh wow, this is epic. It was very well organized into a bunch of folders and stuff. And hearing you say, Chris is very well organized. Do you think you've been inspired and pushed by the way he runs the band? You kind of like adapt it to the way you run the drum corps.
Oh, definitely, yeah. I like to think that I learn from people around me all the time. Even people less experienced than myself. I suppose my students, even that you learn all the time, don't you? But yeah, Chris has been a very positive influence on me. My wife would maybe not agree with that, but because because he is, like I said, he's intense, and I am probably more intense than I was before because of that, or maybe partly because of that. I'm
Really?
quite driven, and
You have to
yeah.
be. You have to be. If you're at top of the competitive, band, and not like to the max, but you still you want to win. So it does kind of like make sense that way. Do you think your style? It's funny you said you got more. You change, not personally, but working with Chris. Do you think your style has changed from obviously from when you started with shots, but you've been with Scottish Power for I don't know, over 5 years. Do you think your style of writing and your style of leadership has changed and evolved over those years since you took the job?
Um, Yeah, I think inevitably it has, because when I first joined Scottish Power, it was a rebuild process. It was the, as much as I say it was easier than dealing with L&B. That the first couple of years of taking on a new coach, I mean that's always going to be, a bit of an uphill struggle for a while. It's definitely more. I would say I'm more relaxed now than I was at the beginning, because I was joining a band that was already in the top six, or near the top six at least. And obviously I hadn't proven myself as a leading drummer of a top flight band yet. So I felt a wee bit of pressure that way, I guess, and maybe that pressure came out in other ways, in the way I was with people around me. I mean, I always try to be respectful and that kind of thing, and treat people the way I'd want to be treated, kind of thing. But yeah, I would say I felt a wee bit of pressure the first few years, and that would have probably affected my style of leadership. Um, but yeah, you always learn. You always learn as you go, and you pick up new things every year. I would say.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you you know what I like to ask this question is like, what is your favorite sort of memory, good or bad, with Scottish Power, for example, because that's the band that you're playing with right now. In the past, like years past few years since you took the job, obviously, I'm thinking it might be the one time when you won the European for drumming. I think it was a few years ago. But what was the most memorable experience that you've had with the band?
Uh, um, yeah, I mean, I think it was the Scottish we won in 2000, whenever it was, 19, or for the drum. Oh, the band when the I don't know, Glarin. I don't know. But
It's too
one
many.
thing that stands out to me is our yeah. I've got lots of great memories. We've had some really good performances of our Archie Campbell medley at the World Championships, both in 2019 and this year, and both of those performances have stood out to me as being like very memorable. We had people in tears coming out of the arena and that kind of thing. Just everybody were really emotional about it, because it was all, I suppose, all this hard work is just it all comes to a head, and the tension is building, and then you have a great performance, and it's like, yeah, a lot of people were just a bit
It's amazing.
overwhelmed with it. So that was quite memorable, I guess.
Nice. And looking
Mhm.
back at, like, we're talking about like your evolution in maybe style leadership. How do you how do you approach like writing scores? It's funny you were mentioning, and I loved it. You were like, oh, back, when I was younger, I would listen to the recording and imagine that what they were playing was this, rhythm. Um, Now, obviously, you have your own style, and I imagine you write music without having to listen and look back at different scores. But how do you approach writing music? Like, if I'm thinking it's a year, September to August, which is the Worlds. Do you have like a process, like a year plan? Without sharing too much, I know I don't want other bands to hear how you do things, but do you have like sort of a plan through the year on how you come about writing music?
Um, not really a timeline, other than trying to get it all done as quickly as possible. It's not. I wouldn't say there's timeline. We've got timelines for other things. That's one of Chris's things, uh, for organising the band, and so people know what to do and all that. But in terms of music writing, the one thing I asked when I met up with Chris the very first time we met, about me coming on as leading drummer potentially. Um, the one thing I asked Chris when he said to me at the end of the meeting, "Is there anything you'd like to ask me?" I said, "Yeah." The one thing I said, which would help me as a leading drummer of any band, is to have the music really early, before the winter starts. Really, before, if I could have the music as soon as we're finished with the Worlds, basically, that gives me more time to get everything done in good time, before Christmas and all that,
Yeah.
and hopefully well in time before that, and from then on, I was taken on as leading drummer, and from then on, Chris has always been really good at doing that. He usually has the medley finished midsummer. For if there's a new medley, then it'll be
Wow.
finished by midsummer for the following year. So he's been great like that. In terms of myself, in a time, that's not really a timeline, but yeah, as I say, I try and get it done as quickly as possible. It's not always easy with the world solos in October. To If I want to do a good bit of practice every day, to also commit loads of time to score writing. So normally I get one or two done before the solos, and the rest I'll just have to wait till after, kind of thing.
Yeah.
This year, we're a bit less ahead of the game. So I think I got the new medley last week,
Oh,
and
wow.
and I've not actually written anything yet. And I'm okay with it, because we're not actually changing a huge amount. We're changing one medley, and that's it. There's nothing else. So I'll catch
Right.
up.
And then you
Uh,
listen to it, and then you listen to it as a whole, and then you're already coming up with ideas, or are you more like tune by tune? You get a tune, you kind of focus on that one, and then you get into another tune.
yeah, no, I do like to listen to all the scores a good few times before I start delving into one particular tune, so I get a feel for how the whole medley is going to come together,
Hmm.
or at least a rough idea. If there might be a few key moments that I want to keep in mind, and which may affect other areas in the medley, that kind of thing. But yeah, that's just really initially, and then I do get stuck into writing each score, but
Hmm.
always, with a connection to the next tune, and how's that going to work. Um,
Nice.
so I usually start by just I really always try to memorize the pipe score before I start writing, with every little embellishment, the smallest details, so I can sing it and to perfection, before I start writing, and that way I think you're much better placed to have a good view of the whole piece, before you start writing. Um, and usually when you do that, when I do start writing, um, it starts off with a wee bit of finger tapping, and just beating out the rhythms of the tune, and that kind of thing, uh, and then I'll just start jamming. Once I've got the tune memorized, I'll just start, just playing along, just making things up, and usually I'll come across one or two places in the score which I want to feature in some way, uh, like a key moment somewhere, where you want to do something different that's going to stand out, or just there might be just one particular phrase that really catches you, and you think, oh, that's really cool. I want to really
Hmm.
highlight that, and then once you've got I usually start with those kind of the kind of key moments, and then the ending, and a strong opening, um, and those are the kind of the posts or the pillars that I try to work between. So once you've got your key moments and your endings and your good start in there, then you can build the score around that, and it gradually starts to take shape that way.
Nice. That's interesting. Yeah, there's
But
a
yeah,
strategy. You have a strategy in place when it comes to like actually writing.
yeah, in terms of actually writing, yeah, yeah. I like to try and to have some in each score that I write, to have something that's going to make you turn your head. Something that where you're doing something different, something unexpected, something something that just makes you kind of look up and raise your eyebrows, and yeah, because I think there's those moments that captivates the listener, and holds your attention, and I guess that's for me the one of the main things. You've got to, you don't want the listener or the judges in competitive pipe bands um, to be losing interest halfway through a tune.
Right.
So I guess that's what I try to avoid at all costs.
People
But yeah, it's all
snoozing in
about,
the back.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Nice.
Um,
Yeah, that's super interesting. How like obviously people are different. I imagine it was somewhere around that, but it's very interesting that there's the intro, the ending, but there's also trying to find those like momentum or keep the momentum going through the medley or the presentation with interesting bits here and there.
yeah. And the other thing I try to do is just to have lots of variety, and not to be repetitive in the phrasing, and the accenting, and the and the dynamics, even, just to be unexpected, and do things that are unexpected instead of things that are predictable. That's kind of some of the kind of main things I try to do when I'm writing. Um, so yeah, opening parts, yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to think of what else to say about that. I mean, there's lots of different ways of creating variety. There's using different rudiments, rudiment variety. There's the variety of accents, building your accents in, and not having too many first beat accents, or not enough first beat accents. And sometimes it could be nice to have almost a whole part with no downbeat accents, if it's done tastefully, as long as you got a couple in there just to ground it, and but then returning to the strong accent in the next part,
Hmm.
that kind of thing. I try to kind of mix it up a wee bit like that, um, and yeah, in every sense, be not predictable, and to be interesting, make it interesting to listen to.
Right, right, right.
um, uh, mhm.
And to play too,
Other
right?
things like
Do you
sorry, on you go.
do, do you so I think there's like a lag, but do you think that sometimes you struggle with not trying too hard to be different or to be interesting? Like, do you sometime where you step back, you're like, wow, I think I went too far, or you always like try to move slowly into getting that interesting bits in?
I, no, I don't actually think so, because I think I'm the kind of person who very much leans against the tune, the melody, and so I'll know when I'm sitting there playing, and trying to come up with things. I'll feel it. If it doesn't support the melody, I'll very quickly move away from it. If it might be a really cool, interesting rhythm or phrase to play as a drummer, but if it does nothing for the tune, then
Hmm.
it's useless. As for the band, and at the end of the day, for me, when I write, it's for the band. It's always about what's best for the overall. Um, what produces the best musical sound, and what's most pleasing.
Hmm.
Um, so
Makes sense.
yeah, yeah, that kind of thing.
Nice. Yeah, that's great to hear. I'm mindful of your time. We're already 15 minutes in, but just to wrap up, you have the World Solos Championship coming up, right? It's in what's at the end of the month. And you're obviously a contender. You've been in the prizes for many years, so that's your big thing. And then what's the goal for this year? You're both teaching on the side too. You have George Harriet, is it? Oh, maybe you
Yeah,
changed
yeah,
school.
Coach
Yeah,
Harriet School. Yeah,
yeah. What's the goal
yeah.
with
So
the school kids?
the school kids, I've got maybe I think 10 of them, maybe seven snare drummers and a few tenors playing at the World Solos this year, that's kind of the usual number. And they've been working away for the last month, and yeah, things are going pretty well on that front. Yeah, as long for them, it's just all about having a good performance. I try and kind of instill it into them that it's about the music and not about the prizes, and focus on the music, ignore all the nonsense around you. Because the kids can get quite nervous. As can we all. But yeah, I just it's all about relaxing them and boosting their confidence and getting them working hard, I suppose, as well. And for myself, I maybe started a wee bit earlier this year, preparing. So yeah, probably about 2 months before, maybe just shy of 2 months before the World Solos, I started practicing on the drum, and I've been doing it pretty much every day since. I missed the
Oh,
odd day when something's up, but and I have been trying to do a bit more than usual. So
nice.
with two young kids in the house, it's becoming increasingly more difficult to find time for things. So I've now started getting up crazy early to go into work for 7 o'clock and play on the drum for an hour before work,
Wow.
and then I'll usually play a bit at lunchtime and another hour after work, that kind of thing. So I try and get quite a bit done. Another thing I've been doing a bit differently is using my headphones and just playing a lot more to a metronome on the drum.
Oh, right.
So that's
Okay.
something I haven't maybe done as much of in the past, but I tried that for the kind of the warm up event in one of the qualifiers in the spring, and I found it was quite helpful, actually. A nice way to practice and break
Hmm.
the routine of just playing one MSR after the other over and over and over again. You actually, it gives you a bit more purpose in your practicing, and something.
Right.
Not that I think I can't find time, but just something to lean against and something to focus your thoughts on, while you're playing. And you know I find myself actually playing for longer as well, because I kind of start to I get almost obsessed by the beat. You get that click in your ear, and
Yeah.
you're like, there's that bit again. And we're
Yeah.
talking minuscule little movement, but it's quite fun, actually. So before you know it, you've been playing for hours, and you don't realize it, kind of thing,
Yeah.
and your
Yeah.
hands are going great. So yeah, I quite enjoyed that.
Nice. It's
Yeah.
a
So
dedication
yeah,
to be better and better and better and more perfect. And I mean, at that level, it's great to hear that. Not that you've been waking up early, but it's great to hear that you've been, so dedicated to practicing every day, and for 2 months. I think most of the time you watch the World Solos online, and you're like, oh wow, that was a great performance, or man, I'm not sure about that. But you have no idea that behind that performance is, every day and for 2 months, and you sharing about how you want to improve and get better. Like that, there is so much effort and work that goes behind every performances that it's great to highlight with you.
yeah, yeah. No,
Um,
well, I suppose we all want to do well and want to keep on improving. I suppose it might be tempting, once you've been doing it for quite a number of years, to kind of just stick with what you know, and but yeah, I want to keep improving. So I've also started running a bit to try and improve my physical health a wee bit. I'm thinking maybe it'll help my concentration, and drink more water and things like that. Just trying to think of all the marginal
Nice.
gains. Something we talk a lot about in the power, marginal
Really.
gains.
The
So
invisible
yeah,
work. Love it. It's like being an athlete. Hey, pushing it to the max. So, well, yeah, this was awesome. I definitely feel more comfortable talking to a drummer than a piper, because I can really relate to, like, the score writing that you were talking about. Um, and also, funny enough, when I started thinking about this project, you were one of the first person that came to mind, because your story is quite unique. I mean, you're definitely not from Scotland. You're now leading drummer of one of the best drum corps and band in the world, and your journey is quite inspiring. So I'm very glad that I got to catch up with you, and highlight your story, because I think it's unique and it's inspiring for anyone that I hope will be listening and from another country and hoping to get into pipe band drumming. So thank you so much for chatting with me today. I really appreciate it. And I guess all the best for
thank
the
you
World
for.
Solos. I hope the running pays off.
No, thanks very much. Yeah, well, we'll wait and see, but I'll be doing my best for sure.
Yeah,
It was nice
sounds good.
talking to you. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. Yeah. Enjoy the rest of the weekend.
Yeah, you
See ya.
too.
See
Okay,
ya.
cheers.